we have our closing keynote for Bridge by Deborah Quazzo on private capital's role where money meets talent. The keynote will be moderated by Dr. Pramath Raj Sinha, founder and chairman, Harappa. I am now going to bid adieu. Really honored to have been your host over the last 2 days. Thank you for being the bridge, and over to you, Pramath, for the closing keynote.
Thank you, Nikhil, for being such an engaging and enthusiastic host and keeping us all going over the last couple of days. I'm deeply grateful for the time you've taken out to anchor this track one here. I'm very excited to introduce our last and valedictory closing session. This is based on the theme of the education enterprise. As you know, we had 3 themes and 3 tracks in this conference. And as we talked about bridging the employability or unemployability gap, we did focus on the enterprise of education, the business of education, which has taken over everybody's imagination and is taking over the world, really. If you look at the kinds of innovation and the kinds of investments that are being made, the numbers of people that are working in the sector right now. And I'm most delighted that we have with us Deborah Quaso to join me today in this keynote session. Deborah, thanks for joining us. I'm going to take a minute to introduce you, if I may. Deborah is truly somebody who's quite formidable in this whole global ed tech space and has shown tremendous leadership. She's the managing partner of GSV Ventures. It's a venture fund that invests in education and workforce skilling technologies that all over the world. And by virtue of her role as an investor and somebody who I think can really see around corners when it comes to education and technology, she's been involved in many companies and sits on the boards of several of them. In India, I know that she sits on the Akash Educational Services board. She's now just joined the board of Simply Learn as well. And she's on several other boards like Ascend Learning, Class EDU, Create and Learn, Digreed, ETS, and the list is endless. So if you ever want to Google her, you'll know how broadly and how widely she's involved in building education tech companies. Deborah is also the co-founder of the ASU, the Arizona State University, and GSV Summit, which I think has been going on, Deborah, for quite a few years now. How many years?
12, yeah, just had our 12th one.
Yes, and compared to our fledgling start, I think you are probably 100 times as big as what we are trying to do here in India. But I wanted you to know that you're our role model, and we are just starting out here, and maybe we should collaborate in the future about doing something like this here in India or in the region. If you look at the lineup of speakers at the ASU GSV Summit every year, it's quite staggering. I don't think there's anybody who's not there. So thank you again for joining us. And I think where we wanted to end this 2 days, and in that sense, this is really kind of the icing of the whole 2 days, is how do we think about how the world is going to unfold? Because as a person who's investing in new ventures, I think you bring a very unique perspective and a view on where the world is going. And so let's start this conversation with a broader question of what is the broader philosophy around with which you are investing these days, especially in education and tech firms.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been in this sector for 25 years, which is suffice it to say we were in it way before it was viewed to be as attractive as it is today by the sort of the wide part of the investing world. And it was because we always saw the opportunity. There was a massive chunk of GDP really in every country goes to education. There's massive dysfunction in pretty much every country in education. There was little application of technology when we started. And yet just an incredibly important problem, right? I mean, it's not only determining the future of individuals, but the future of cities and countries, and for that matter, the world. So it's pretty gratifying to actually see where we are today. And Pramath, you've been here as long as I have, so I think you appreciate the same. It's gratifying to see that there has been such a rush of great entrepreneurs and founders who are coming into the space to solve big problems, and capital has followed the adoption of some great ideas and some of the great founders, and so that's been a very gratifying thing to watch here over really the last 5 years, but of course accelerated by the tragedies of the pandemic. When we look at things today, the way we really always have looked at things, we haven't really modified a lot of how we viewed the sector. We have an investing framework we call the 5 Ps, and we look at, to simplify things when we look at a company or look at a founder group. When we think about people first and foremost, and what the people are doing, we look at the potential for the product or the product or service. We look at the product itself. Is it new, original? Is it compelling? Is it disruptive? We look for signs of predictability in the business model, and our 5th P is purpose, right? So we believe the companies with real purpose are going to perform better financially. We think those concepts are very much aligned, and so we think that's critically important. I think particularly as we come out of a pandemic and the tragedy that, frankly, sadly we're still in it, I suppose. The learning loss that's occurred, the children who have not had access to school, in Chicago, where I spend most of my time, apparently there are 100,000 children missing from the enrollment books today, which is in a district that's really 350,000. So that's pretty stunning. So we're going to have a lot of problems to solve coming out of this, and I think the silver lining is there are some very strong solutions that have been developed over the last decade, and we look across pre-K, what we call pre-K to gray education, so early childhood, K-12, higher education, workforce. We think those are increasingly mashing up against each other, and importantly mashing up against each other, and because it's not like in the old days where you could kind of graduate from college or not and go off into the world and work and never need any further education. That's just not the case anymore. So those are the general parameters of how we're looking at things today.
Now, you covered a lot of ground there, so I just want to pause and capture some of the things you said, because they were very powerful. I think the first part, when you talked about how you got into this space, I think was seeing the opportunities across the world because of the dysfunctions. And I think you all probably saw the potential of technology addressing those dysfunctions. I think that is a very powerful thesis that's really gotten accelerated and born in the recent past. I then heard you talk about the 5 Ps, and just remind me, so there was people, there was product, there was predictability, purpose. I missed the second or third one there. Potential, of course, and that of course has to be there. So yes, so those 5 Ps were very powerful, and I think the point that you're making more about how this kind of really does have a deeper purpose and impact associated with it is a very powerful one. It almost makes it somewhat more, how do I say it, almost like a noble cause to invest behind as a sector, doesn't it? That must feel very exciting.
It is. I think it's always, it was funny because we shied away from actually calling ourselves an impact fund in the beginning because the education sector had not been viewed as a very attractive investment sector, and so we didn't want to put a label on it that inferred to people that we were looking for a handicap and that we were looking for longer time to get returns or lower returns, because we felt like, as I sort of said on the purpose point, that impact and that a company is not having impact unless it's achieving success at scale when it's technology enabled. And so we think they're inextricably linked, the concepts of impact and scale and resulting probably performance. And so it is exciting to be working in an area where you really can make a difference. It's really important. And yeah, I mean, I think our two fund portfolios, the companies in them address something like 400 million learners around the world at this point, which is
Wow.
Which is exciting.
Wow, 400 million learners, right? I want to come back to the mashup point between all of these, the pre-K to K in a minute. But on this one, it's interesting because for a long time, a lot of the owners of education and skilling and upskilling kind of fell in the lap of the government as the kind of public good that they were supposed to do, and ties back to this impact point. But do you see this as a growing trend where private investors are going to put in a lot more or as much, if you will, around talent than as the government does? It does seem like a relatively new trend, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think you've always had the dynamic in education of the not-for-profit and the for-profit and the government, and that's really three different entities, really, right? And I think what I'm excited by, and we can see it in really all parts of the world, is the collaboration amongst those entities. I think we in the U.S. there is a government role on the skilling side, although I think companies have borne more of the burden here. That's different than India. So I do think that I think for us, just given the size of the gap, right? Given the size of the skills gap that we're dealing with, and the learning gap and then the skills gap, which the learning gap will migrate into the skills, because it's a skills gap, given what's happened to children in the pandemic. I mean, we're going to be facing an even worse skills gap in the workforce. So I think just given the scale of the problem and the need for urgency, I think that governments are not always famous for urgency. I think we've seen some real urgency, coming by governments around the world coming out of the pandemic to try to apply funds to accelerate recovery. But I think the role that investor, both philanthropic and philanthropic and commercial investors, like venture funds like ours, I think it's a really important role that all three entities play in catalyzing change and in driving organizations to scale. And I think that's one of the things we love about the ASU GSV Summit is, we always called it a strange cocktail of people that gathered together. We were fortunate to have 3,500 people in San Diego last week safely. I'm happy to say, sadly missing most of our international partners,
yeah.
But it was still a fantastic event. But what we've always loved about that event is that it brought is a different version of mashup. It brings together folks from the philanthropic world, all the major foundations, from the investment world, and from the policy and politics world. So we see all three of those entities get together in a way that perhaps they haven't, it's not a natural, didn't used to be a natural thing for those entities to all be in the same room collaborating. I think it's very encouraging, certainly in the US markets, to see that collaboration having matured greatly. And still seeing the important role that groups like the Walton Foundation or the Walmart Foundation, others are doing, but they're also doing it alongside investors, to basically driving towards the same end, because again, just the numbers are so staggering.
It's actually quite fascinating for me also to see that, while you and I kind of have seen this on a day-to-day, year-to-year basis, but it almost seems like a whole new model is being created, where the traditional boundaries, like you just described amongst the players, is getting mashed up. But what you referred to earlier about the pre-K to gray, at least in India, I observe the kind of private investment that is coming into some of the companies, and the usual suspects, the Baijus and the Unacademies and so on of the world. Everybody is now playing across the chain. They started maybe with test prep, but they're getting into K-12, they're buying higher education companies, they're getting into skilling. And this is so non-traditional. It is, if you look at the way government is organized in India, we still within our education department have a different group looking at K-12, a different group looking at...
So do we. Yeah, so do we. Yeah.
So it's also interesting the mashup that is happening at that end, right?
I love it, actually. I think, watching Eruditus acquire ID Tech, which is a US company that does, workforce skills in the high school, in the high school market, actually in the K-12 market, but leveraging university relationships. So, I mean, I think there's some very elegant strategic thinking going on by the leaders of some of these very best companies, who are really thinking about the lifelong learner. I think there's they are epitomizing really the mashup and the fact that they see the opportunity to take a learner from start to finish, and I think it's fascinating. I think the activity that's going, we've never seen activity like this. The merger and acquisition activity in education technology globally was up 480% or something in the first half of 2021, and it was 15 billion, or I mean, it was a number that had never been seen before in these markets, and it's much about creating vertical and horizontal stacks, vertical stacks. The other thing that's really interesting, and it's been sort of one of the silver linings for me of the pandemic, is it's become so global. I mean, the sector has become so global. I mean, 10 years ago, you were an Indian company, that's what you were. You were an American company, that's what you were. Maybe you had a little international sales, but there was more friction to it. Today you're seeing companies building backends in India, sell, that then go to market in Southeast Asia or in the US or in MENA. American company, same thing. So it's really quite fascinating, and it was, for us at GSV, we spent a huge amount of time during the pandemic on Zoom, of course, in India with companies and investors and people like you, and it was really has been an incredibly stimulating exercise, or in the context of a otherwise pretty horrible global situation, but. Yeah, it's been fascinating.
I'm tempted, therefore, to ask, right? Do you see any unique features in the way we in India are approaching these opportunities relative to the rest of the world? What is your take on this?
Yeah, I think the secret advantage, or it's not so secret, but anymore. But I think the advantage that Indian company, one, you've got people outside of India forget that college graduates in India are what percent are engineers. I mean, it's a cadre of engineers. So finding a technical founder, for starters, is not hard. And you have a lot of. And IIT obviously is just an absolute machine of generating graduates who go out and start companies, and other universities as well, of course. But that's such a machine, and I think that the advantage is an incredibly entrepreneurial culture. I think a passion for education. I think I mean, I tell you say it doesn't really matter your socioeconomic level. You understand people in India understand that education is the key lever to the future for their children and for themselves. I don't think we see that in the U.S. as in the same way. You also have this advantage of incredibly high quality human capital, and a cost advantage. So you're seeing, when you put all these pieces together, incredibly high quality, a passion for the issue of education, real technology, incredible engineering skills, which is as ed tech gets more sophisticated with AI and NLP and other emerging technologies that are driving better and better products. You've got, because many American companies, for example, have their AI backends in India. So I think there's just this interesting whole package that can be put together, out of the India market and delivered not only in India, but also to the rest of the world. I think ed tech as an Indian export, is a huge theme and huge opportunity that a number of folks, including Baiju and Eruditus and others, are capitalizing on right now. But yeah, I mean, you can't compare the cost advantage in India versus the U.S. and the impact that has on a business model is pretty profound. So and the incredible quality. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And we're seeing very original ideas too, and just very, very, very talented entrepreneurs. We actually did a short video, interviewed some of the EdTech founders about the pandemic, and because as we watched, companies, Americans didn't see the kind of death that was experienced in the India market, and I mean it was just it was heartbreaking, and yet you saw such resilience and teamwork and heart, and so we did a little video at the summit. Actually, I'll send it to you. It was really lovely, actually, as a tribute to just what was incredible resilience we saw from teams in India during the worst times.
I've often wondered, and maybe this is a biased sort of frog in the well view, but I often feel that just the same dysfunction that created the opportunity that you saw, those dysfunctions for us in India are so much greater and at such a complex scale, and we are so far behind in terms of the numbers that we have to cater to, that it's almost without coming up with disruptive ideas and innovation. If we didn't do that, we would really be sunk. And therefore, there is really a potential for us not just to export EdTech, but to really export innovative EdTech, because the sandbox here is tremendous.
Absolutely. I think no question. I think the sandbox is tremendous. I think they're also, it's kind of like, if you remember when, the cell phone came along, and some countries were able to skip the whole, phone part and go straight to cell phone.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost that kind of analogy for India with EdTech. I mean, you can just skip, going through all the phases and go right to the innovation. I think that's right. I think you're going to see, more and more, great implementations out of the India market into the India market, as well as out, from it out. So, as well as lots of international companies very eager to come into India. So it's I think it's a fascinating moment, and it is an enormous problem. I mean, it's an enormous challenge.
Tell me, there's a question from somebody called Veena on our Q&A box, and it's a lurking fear that a lot of people have, this regulation of EdTech or something drastic like China has done. And how do you see that, again, from your vantage point across the world?
Yeah, I wouldn't be smart enough to comment on what, other countries, I think we've certainly had here in the US have had our challenges around regulation, and particularly related to the higher education market. And, this well, related to for-profit entities and accreditation and government regulation, government oversight. And that tug of war continues. I think it's evolving to a good place. I think it's led people to really question some of the regulation and its value. I mean, what does accreditation really mean, for example? So I think certainly the China, that what has gone on in China since February is chilling, and particularly as more and more there are more and more theses develop, as to the source. I mean, the underlying reasons for it. That seem to be, kind of the theories seem to be evolving every day. And I just, I would hope that there's enough of a desire to move the ball forward and get people on learning gaps and skills gaps, and that governments can see that there are that combining government with philanthropic with investor-backed initiatives is the way to get to a goal line that's visible in the near term, and not way out distant in the future. So hopefully pragmatic reality can carry the day across the world, except for China. But I think China's a unique situation. Yeah.
You know,
Because it's
yeah, it's hard to tell, and I appreciate your sort of taking that view. It's not clear what how this whole it's so early days that it's good to press ahead on the opportunity and not worry about some of the constraints that might come in, and hopefully governments will see the value of what we are all trying to do.
Well, I would also say that you in China, you had a dynamic where, and part of this was the issue where it was a pretty expensive service delivery, right? I mean,
Yes.
and I think that the difference that you see in India and you see it in the US for that matter, right, is, I mean, certainly there are always going to be expensive, some version of expensive delivery. That's not where we invest. So it's not how that's not part of our mandate, but there will always be people slicing the top. But the reality is the best change is happening, the 90% underneath the top 10%. And I think that dynamic is true. I think the reality is it was perhaps a bit different in the Chinese market, which caused some of the government consternation. But what's amazing is happening in India. I mean, for example, I think India, some fascinating tutoring companies are going to go into the US market out of India and be able to deliver, incredible academic outcomes for low income kids, because in a way that has never been done before, because no one could afford to produce a model that did that. And I think the disruption around low cost, high quality delivery is profound. And I think and we're seeing it. We're an investor in Lead School in India, and I so impressed with what they're doing, and so wish I could bring that to the US.
Yes.
So that's a different orientation.
I completely agree. I think the big opportunity for EdTech is to bring in high quality, low cost to everyone, and do away with low quality or medium quality. I mean, just focus on high quality and one high quality for everyone, regardless. And this whole pecking order that we've had, that, you go to a tier 2 or a tier 3 institution because you couldn't get into a tier 1 is so unfair. And that the fairness that EdTech brings in is really powerful. Ending this, because we are now running out of time and I want to let you go. I'm sure you're still recovering from the 3,500 attendees in San Diego. What's the next big thing? What are things that you're really excited about that you see around the corner?
Well, I think the next big thing is actually an evolution of what's been sort of bubbling for a while. So I think we're going to begin to see organizations. So let's take artificial intelligence, natural language processing. I mean, all those technologies. I think we're beginning to see the first signs of truly adaptive platforms that are that can really personalize learning for everybody. I mean, people have been talking about this forever, right? It's been like the holy grail, and it's frankly been pretty much a lot of smoke and mirrors until now. And I think we are seeing, this technology is sophisticated enough. The teams are sophisticated. We're seeing, we have a theme called accelerated learning. There are companies that can actually help students, learners, get unstuck quickly. You have a number of those in the India market. We've got a number of those in the US and in investor in a company called Photomath in Europe. And so I think applying all these emerging technologies to streamline, remove friction from learning. I think education is a sector that's full of friction, and I think getting the friction out is a key thing. So I think we're going to finally see real application of gamification to drive engagement. We're going to see, really the highly effective application of emerging technology to make learning, to your point, better. So you're going to see the Coursera's of the world get more sophisticated in the experience that learners have when they go on that platform, and they've already made big moves there. But I think others with those kinds of learner numbers are going to keep getting the product better, and it's going to be through the application, not 100%, but I think the application of all these technologies that we've been talking about for a long time, they just haven't come to fruition, that we're going to get to a much better place in terms of learning delivery.
Well, I'm really excited by that, and I'm hoping that all of our folks at Harappa are listening to this. But I'm sure all of the other folks out there who are using technology to really further the cause of education. I think what is really exciting is that, like you said, the personalization, the customization, the use of AI, gamification to really up the ante and then make it available to everyone.
Everyone, make it available for everyone.
Is really the exciting future possibility. Well, thank you so much, Deborah, for so easily agreeing to be here and for delivering the cherry on the cake for this conference by delivering this very uplifting session. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Great to see you.
Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't take all the questions. I know there were a lot of questions, but we've tried to keep these sessions short, and now we are right at the end. I wanted to thank every one of you for attending, and at this point, I'm handing it over to my co-founder, Shreyasi Singh, to wrap things up for us. Over to you, Shreyasi.
Thank you, Pramath. And that was such an interesting and enlightening conversation for us, especially at Harappa, and I think for everyone interested in education in India. Low cost and affordable, high quality and high tech. And that's the way to make great impact. It has been such a fantastic 2 days. We are so thankful for all of you who attended, and especially to our speakers who so readily agreed to move calendars, to take up any challenging sessions and challenging formats that we threw at them, because we wanted things to be interesting and have a variety of formats. And we began, I think, for Pramath and me, constructing Bridge was something that we've talked about so much. So it genuinely feels like at some level, one big thing achieved in one big green country. But I think the idea of connecting the larger world of skills, learning, technology, academia, and industry, I think the 2 days here have convinced us that there is so much to do, really a life's work to do to be able to improve and impact education in India. And we are just getting started, and we commit to taking up so many themes that have come up in the last 2 days and genuinely trying to make a difference. We can look forward to a bridge charter of sorts where we will pledge to make some of the changes that we have talked about. And my final thanks and gratitude is always to the incredible Harappa team, who just seems to make all my and all our dreams come true. So thank you so very much to the Harappa team, and congratulations for getting this. Thank you, everyone. I hope you had a great 2 days with us, and I hope there's a lot for you to think about and take back. With that, the Harappa Bridge 2021 has come to a close. See you next year, or even before that. We'll hear a lot more from us. See you soon. Bye.